All right, welcome everyone to Holding the Line, America's Fight for Religious Freedom. I have with us Joseph Durso, who we've interviewed before as part of our documentary. He was in Longwood, and there was a wonderful story about fighting for religious freedom. And so we decided to stop in to meet him and have decided to follow up. He has some new adventures going on in his life. We want to talk about that. And what we really discovered since then was just how much he knew about political science, how much he knew about law, and some of the things that he's trying to do right now to teach people, the next generation, about political science. So, Joseph, thanks for being here on this show.
Yeah, Troy, thank you for having me back. I really appreciate it.
So give us a little preview, just your educational background.
Sure.
I know you went to FSU, which I had a few boys that went there.
I did. So education was always a really important part of our upbringing. My mother was a teacher. And so she encouraged my sisters and I to always, be lifelong students. My sisters actually went into education after they left school. So it's definitely an important part of what we do. I went to Florida State University and I earned a bachelor's degree in political science and a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary social science with a concentration in economics. Went later on, about 6 years after I graduated the second time from FSU, I went and I earned a master's degree from George Washington University in Washington, D.C. It's a master's in professional studies, and that's a focus on political management and issue advocacy. And so that's kind of what I do for a living. In my day job, I work for a large nonprofit that works with abused and neglected kids and works in Medicaid, Medicare, or Medicaid for children in the foster care system.
That's Embrace Families.
It is Embrace Families, right? And so I'm an advocate for kids. I've been there 17 years. And then most recently in 2017, I attended Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government, and I earned a master's in public administration. So I have my MPA from Harvard. Yeah.
Well, what is it about Embrace Families that's sort of near and dear to your heart? Why are you a part of that?
It's a lot of people ask me that question, and I got to tell you, when I worked in the legislature, before I went to work in this organization, I actually was a chief of staff in the state Senate. And I heard all of these stories about what was happening in the child welfare system, about kids going missing and kids being killed and, trouble recruiting foster parents and just overall problems in the system. It was underfunded, it was overworked, it was bloated, it was top heavy, just a lot of real issues. And I actually wound up taking a meeting for my senator with the local person who was heading this new idea, this what's called community-based care. And so at the time, Governor Jeb Bush, and before him, Governor Lawton Chiles, started the process of privatizing child welfare. So you have a Democratic governor and a Republican governor who got together and said, you know what, the system's broken and we need to do something to fix it. And their focus was accountability. And so they devolved it from a big Tallahassee bloated system to basically make communities take ownership of their kids and serve their kids. And so every county in Florida now has what's called a community-based care, or CBC, lead agency that it's responsible for. Some are big, like Miami-Dade is a big county, so it's got its own. Ours covers Orange, Osceola, Seminole County. I always joke it's where Disney World is and where all the people that live, work, and play at Disney go or live. So we cover Central Florida. So when I was in the legislature, I saw all of these stories and I saw an opportunity to really contribute to what I thought was making a very important system a lot better for a lot of kids. And it turns out it was a great choice. I've been there 17 years in September.
Yeah, well, you're definitely, you just know you're making a difference in kids' lives, and that's got to be very meaningful to you. Now, in addition, you had other jobs, a little more high profile. People would say, wow, it's amazing, some of the other political jobs that you had. You were a councilman in Longwood, and then you were also the mayor. How long did you work in both capacities?
Sure. So I was first elected in 2008 to the Longwood City Commission. So I served as a commissioner for all 9 years. But of those 9 years, I spent 6 of those years as either the mayor or the deputy mayor of the city.
Okay.
And so that's where you and I had the pleasure of meeting, where
Yep.
when we were fighting the good fight on that Veterans Cross that was given to the city, donated to the city.
Yeah.
But it was a very unique experience. I was a very I'd like to think I'm still a young man, but I was a very young man then. I was first elected when I was I think I was 28 or 29 years old, and I served 9 years.
Well, you didn't turn gray like the presidents all do.
No,
So.
I'm getting there, bud. If you look closely, I'm starting to get there. But it really was a unique opportunity. Public service is something that was ingrained in us. As I mentioned, my mom was a teacher, but my father was a police officer in New York City, and so we were always taught to give back. That public service is a good way to do that. And so when I graduated from school, I went right into work as a legislative person, and then I went to work in this nonprofit. And then, after some conversations with some local leaders, decided that, it was my time to maybe serve in office. And so, I took on that challenge, and thankfully I was elected 3 terms, and it was a really great experience, and I hope I was able to contribute. So.
And now currently you're a political science professor, calling you a
Right.
professor?
Yeah, so I'm an adjunct. Yeah, I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Central Florida. So I teach a couple of classes a semester. Yeah.
So is it easier to teach about political science or to go into politics?
I don't think either one of them is easy.
Oh, okay.
Neither one of them is really easy. So going into politics has its own challenges. But when you speak about politics, especially with a generation of students that has really been co-opted by social media and by 7-second sound bites. There are plenty of times in my class I play the bad guy quite a bit because I challenge them. Republicans, Democrats, whether you're a conservative or liberal. I have people in my class, students in my class, that have been self-proclaimed communists, socialists, all types come to class.
Wow.
And no matter who you are or what your belief, I always push you to justify what you are arguing. I don't accept the 7-second, just like, regular soundbite. Give me facts, give me figures, give me history that defends your cause or your argument. And you would be surprised at how many of them really shut down almost immediately once you challenge them to do that. And so, that presents its own challenges because, you're trying to convey the way the system is intended to work, the way that the founding fathers intended the system to work. And you're confronted with people who really get their news oftentimes from Facebook or Instagram.
Right. Or Twitter in 140 some characters, right?
Right. And it's not a complete story. I mean, it's really easy to say capitalism is terrible. But it's not so easy to justify it when you look at what socialist economies go through, what communist economies go through. It's not easy to justify it when you look at someone who starts from the bottom, comes from maybe a poor background, a poor neighborhood, builds their own business and becomes a millionaire, and then is able to hire new people, create more jobs, create more value to the economy, and help other people succeed. It's really easy to stick to those, like I say, 7-second sound bites. But when your feet are to the fire and you have to actually, defend yourself, it is a much more difficult task. And so both of them have challenges. Running for office, you're kind of on the hot seat all the time. But certainly being a professor presents its own challenge. It's very rewarding, though. I will tell you, my students are amazing. They really are.
And it sounds like if I had kids and I was sending them to college, they were going to political science, I'd want them to have you as a teacher because you're doing all the things I would hope they get. But most people have a negative view of college. Maybe this is an opportunity for you to defend that because they think, well, there's this liberal agenda that's being, pushed down the throats, and they're being told, they're not being asked to sort of rationally think, but they're being told what to think. Do you find that true, or do you think people are really sort of overstepping in that thought?
So in some cases, it's true. I mean, I view my role as a professor as someone who is supposed to give students a real thorough view of the world as best I can and help them to learn to think their way through it, right? Not every student that I teach is going to end up being a capitalist or a Republican or a Democrat or whatever it might be. I want them to be able to critically look at a subject and identify what's good, what's bad, what's honest, and what's false. And that's the skill set that I try to instill in my students. I don't want them to just take what I say as gospel. I encourage them to look stuff up, challenge me. If you disagree with something, feel free to bring those arguments to class, because it's not about I'm right, you're wrong, this is what the book says. It really is about you being able to critically look at something and say, you know what, that's just not true. Whether it's about your property taxes or a social political agenda or whatever it might be, you have to be able to see all sides. And I think, unfortunately, what's happening is only one side is getting a lot of exposure because it's always the loudest side. And, you know, it harkens back to that idea of the silent majority, right? The vast majority of people in this country don't hate people. They're not bigots. They're not racist. They don't have, biases built into them. You know, they want to be left alone. They want to be able to run their businesses and raise their families and go, afford to send their kids to school. And these kids are being told that, like, that whole group of people is bad, right? They're biased, or they're wrong on their stands, or
they're bigots.
Yeah, and it's just not it's not right. It's not fair, and I think it really is an injustice, not only to those people that are being accused of being those things, but I think it's an injustice to the kids.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, these are 18, 19, 20-year-old. They're still very impressionable. They haven't, it's really easy to be anti-capitalist when you haven't paid taxes yet. Right? It's really easy to be anti-government when you haven't been protected by the government, or you haven't, opened a business and been protected in the American banking system.
Right.
I have this argument all the time with students where they talk about how things are so great in some of these countries. Some of these countries that they mention are countries where the businesses can be nationalized overnight. If the president of the country decides that they want to take over the oil industry, they can do it just like that, or the sugar industry just like that, or whatever it might be, they can just be taken over. Whereas in the United States, yeah, you might pay a little bit more, it might be a little bit more expensive to operate, but you have protections that you don't have anywhere else in the world. And so it's really an injustice to those kids, because they're learning, and this is their time to develop those skill sets and those that ability to interpret stuff. And it's really not.
Well, are you seeing? I mean, I'm kind of curious about the next generation.
Sure.
Who are going to be shaping some of these policies. Are
Sure.
you feeling hopeful of what you're seeing in just your little neck of the woods? Do you think there's some good critical thinking, unbiased politicians coming down the road?
Sure, I do, actually. And so there are, it is amazing when you present facts to students and it changes their minds, or it causes them to go, well, maybe I wasn't 100%. Maybe I wasn't 100% correct. And what I would say is that if the conversations are governed correctly and fairly, meaning that everyone has an opportunity to speak. I have some hard and fast rules in my class, right? There's no swearing, there's no name calling, there's no physical stuff. It's you have to, and I actually say at the beginning of my class, if you can't handle a tough conversation, if you can't handle the hot issues of the day, whether it relates to race or the pro-life, pro-choice argument or education or whatever it might be, if you can't have an adult conversation about those things, this class is not for you. Because we have to rise above the talking points and the social media hit pieces that happen. And we need to be able to communicate and express to each other, like, this is why I think this, and this is why I want you to take me seriously. And so I can tell you that I have a lot of pride, not only in my students, but in the work that they do. You'd be surprised at some of the way that they formulate their ideas and the way they present their ideas in class. So I have a lot of confidence in the next generation. I really do think that they'll be good.
Well, I'm sure that you get a few that get upset and they walk out of your class. What is it they're usually walking out on? What is it where they've sort of hit that wall?
Yeah.
What caused that?
So I'll tell you, I thankfully I haven't had anybody walk out after day one.
Oh,
So on day one, I'm pretty honest. So on day one, I come out of the gate. My students say I come in pretty hot. So I come in and I basically say to them, and I've used this term before, if you're a gentle snowflake and you are easily offended, then this class is not for you, because politics is tough. Governing is hard. Governing is not, I think a lot of people think it's like the West Wing or, like some of these TV shows where it's all, black tie events and parties and it's all great and fun. It's not. It's really, really hard.
instead of backslapping, it's backstabbing, right?
Yeah, in a lot of cases it is. And so I don't want them to walk away with the misconception that it's all fun and games and that you get what you want every single time, because you don't. There are people that fight political battles 20, 30, 40 years before they even break the surface of what they want. Mm-hmm. And so, I tell them on the first day, if you can't handle hard work, if you can't handle tough conversations, this class isn't for you. And every so often, a couple of students recognizing that it's not going to be a simple, just tell me what I want to hear type class, right, they'll walk out, because I tell them I'm not going to confirm your biases. I'm going to challenge your biases. I'm going to make you think about the things that are impacting society today. And some students, they're not up for that. They don't want to deal with that. So I've had a couple walk out, but the ones that stick it out, the ones that stay, are remarkable students. They really are.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Look, the First Amendment is one that's, important, what we look at a lot on this show. And what do you teach them about the First Amendment? Because I don't know if you're sort of opening their eyes in what exactly it says. Maybe they think they know what it says, but hopefully you're teaching them the proper way to view the First Amendment. So how do you teach that concept to them?
Well, so the first thing, and I think I've mentioned this before in our previous conversations, but the first thing I teach them is that it was by far one of the most important, or it is the most important set of rights that we are granted. It is what the founding fathers of our country really thought was the most important foundational part of our existence. It is the ability to pray or not pray. It is the ability to worship the God that you choose or not choose. It is the ability to speak your mind freely without fear of retribution, especially fear of retribution from the government. And so I think what a lot of them have confused is First Amendment rights with hurt feelings. So now, if you say something that's factual, but it offends somebody because they're upset about it, suddenly your right is no longer protected. And that is a real problem that we have, where people have confused, someone's actual rights to be able to express themselves and maybe express unpopular opinions, which is what happens all the time.
Yeah.
Those people now are slowly but surely being silenced, which was the exact opposite of what the founding fathers wanted. The founding fathers wanted people from all walks of life and all opinions to be able to contribute to the conversation. Mm-hmm. Now, there are, of course, some opinions that, while they are protected and are unpopular, are really not appropriate for the public discourse, right? I think we would all agree at this point that, racist type conversations, bigoted conversations, those types of points of view, nobody welcomes them, nobody wants them.
Right.
And while you're welcome to have them because it's a free country, you're not going to change those people. Those people are not welcome in general society. They're not, those arguments are not welcome. But the ability to talk about things like social services and education and healthcare and national defense and immigration, those things don't make you a bigot or a racist or like hateful or discriminatory. Those things make you someone who's participating in civil discourse about policy. Mm-hmm. Immigration is not just about, well, those people want to come here, so they should be allowed to come here, no matter where they're from. It's about public safety. It's about resources that the government provides oftentimes, right? Healthcare, infrastructure. It's about a myriad of things that you have to take into account before you just open the border. There's a real reason why we can't go to Europe. If you or I got on a plane today and we just said, oh, we're here and we're going to stay, There are a number of European countries that would send us home because we don't have the points that we would need to stay. We can't just move there just because. And so it's, I mean, a lot of those conversations I think have been mischaracterized.
Yeah, it's kind of like everybody wants to do whatever they want to do, and they don't want to be told not to do it. And if you tell anyone else they can't do it, then they get offended, and then you're a bigot, and then you're taking away their rights. But it's almost this sort of society without rules, and they're not really. And again, I hope they're doing this in your class. Not really thinking through everything. They're saying, well, if we just let everyone do whatever it is they want to do,
right,
you have chaos.
Right. Well, and I think that's the other side of that coin, right? So one side of that coin is if you say something that upsets me, then you're wrong and you shouldn't be able to say those things. The other side of that coin is I should be able to say whatever I want. And that's also not the case, right? I mean, if you go back and you look at the old example that everyone uses, most professors use, is the screaming fire in the theater example, right?
Right.
So you can't do that. If there's no fire and you scream fire and you cause a stampede and someone dies in that stampede, you could be held liable. And you can't say, well, I can say whatever I want, it's free speech. There are certain limits to what you can't incite violence, right? Like I understand people have varied opinions on a number of hot issues these days. But I would fight anyone who stood on stage and incited people to riot or incited people to hurt someone or to kill someone, or that's not right. And that's not what the First Amendment is about, right? The First Amendment is about a real, genuine discourse between people who disagree. And if we can get back there, if we can get to a point where you don't have to agree with me, you don't even have to like me, but as long as you hear me and I hear you, and at least we can have a conversation, maybe you open my eyes, maybe I open yours. And that's the only way we're going to be able to get out of this quagmire that we're in. Really.
I don't know when this all changed. I mean, I think in my lifetime, I remember Clinton being in office and working with Republicans, and I remember things being a lot more civil.
Yeah,
it got very uncivil. You've probably seen that in your lifetime of being in politics. When do you think it all just went? Was it the internet?
Well, I've been victimized by it. I mean, I've been on the wrong side of a lot of those types of hateful things too. I mean, it is unfortunately, I think, a byproduct of the internet and a lack of accountability. There's a misconception, I think, on the part of the public that if they read something online, it must be true because the internet police have checked it. Yeah. There are no internet police. I could go online right now and create a website today that is filled with nothing but falsifications, nothing but lies. And there are literally thousands of people across the country that will read them and say that must be true. And that's
there is a police, and it's big social media. They are taking down things that affect them.
Yeah, right.
Problem also.
Right, but even even when you think about that, it's taking down the things that offend them. If they keep the things that don't offend them, doesn't mean they're true. Right. And that's the real problem. So, if I go online and I talk about, as an example, I've been a conservative my whole life. I've been a conservative Republican my entire life since I was old enough to identify what the parties were. My mother would tell you I was a rabid conservative when I was a kid. If I go online right now and I say something that Facebook, even if it's factual, if they don't like what I say and they delete it in favor of something that they do like but isn't factual, that's just as bad as what I'm talking about in the discourse, right? Like, we need to be able to have factual, core conversations with each other that are respectful, even if we disagree. And we're just not there anymore because we live in these echo chambers, right? People only watch Fox News or MSNBC, but they don't tune into the other channel to hear what the other side thinks. You read the books that you want to read, not that you should read necessarily. It's important to know what the other side is thinking. If for no other reason than when you finally sit down to debate with them, you want to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah. So now, so thinking about the First Amendment and, religious freedom, It's the first right that that is mentioned. It must have been important if it was the first one. It wasn't. The Second Amendment wasn't the First Amendment. The freedom of the press wasn't first.
Well, I would argue that the Second Amendment was there to help protect the First Amendment.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So as you look at that, you as a mayor, you had to face some decisions that were protecting religious freedom and things like that. So one big thing that seems to be happening a lot is the opening prayers, the the opportunities for certain people, maybe a chaplain, maybe a local pastor comes and prays. In
Sure.
Longwood, what was the policy for something like that?
So, I mean, we actually didn't have a problem for quite some time. So the policy, we just had an opening prayer. And so we would invite any member of any faith to come and speak. At one point, we were challenged by the atheist community. And they insisted that they be able to come and do an opening kind of welcome speech as opposed to a prayer, which we welcomed because, I mean, the First Amendment covers those that pray and those that don't pray. And so there are, swaths of people in the country that don't subscribe to a religion, and they should be represented in public meetings as well. And so they wanted to come, and so we allowed them to do that. And so that wasn't really much of an issue for us. But what I do know that in countless communities across the country, they're running scared and they're shutting prayer down in favor of a moment of silence or just scrapping that whole introductory part altogether. And again, I would argue that that's even counter to the founding fathers. It doesn't say one nation, comma, under God. It says one nation under God. The founding fathers had a belief in higher authority, a higher power that governed our actions and governed those actions for the better. Right now, as we've grown from a Christian nation into a nation that's built on many, many faiths, because there are millions of people that subscribe to all these different faiths, the idea that there's still a superior being, that there's still a force that we can't understand, that we're not meant to understand, but that helps guide us. And overwhelmingly in all faiths, it's love your neighbor, it's support your family, it's love your family, it's do right by your community, do right by yourself. Those tenets are the same. And so I think the founding fathers wanted us to embrace those things, regardless to what faith you subscribe to.
Yeah.
So I'm disappointed to see that a lot of communities do that. But with us, we were challenged, and we allowed I can't remember the name of the organization.
Central Florida Free Thought Community.
Yeah, the Free Thought Community. Yeah, the Central Florida. We allowed the Central Florida Free Thought Community to come in and make a statement, maybe once or twice.
But you would draw a line somewhere, right? So if Satanists showed up and said, "We wanted," which they're doing in a lot of the invocations, what would Longwood's policy have been if you were the mayor during that time?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the tenets of most of those faiths are peace and prosperity and happiness and love and support for one another, support for your family, conjuring up dark spirits, and wanting to summon evil spirits to a meeting is not something that would have been welcomed. And perhaps we would have been challenged in court on that, but that would have been a challenge that we would have readily accepted, because there is a huge difference between organized communities of faith that want to do good, want to do as John Adams used to say, do good and be good, versus communities that are they don't wish well on people. And we certainly wouldn't welcome those things. So.
Yeah, it's again, they'd be screaming, "Oh, about religious freedom, and are you really a religion?" And why are they trying to do this sort of thing? Is it really to do something for the common good, or is it really to sort of disrupt and to attack what is good? I think you get behind motives, and you can't always sort of determine the motives of people. Now, the Longwood Cross, as we'll call it. Sure. And I encourage people to watch that story, because we interviewed you while you were right in the middle of it. Yep. And you were fighting for this cross. It was part of a Vietnam memorial that had sort of made its home in your council chambers there, where you guys were at.
Yeah.
Tell us just briefly, why did that become such a hot topic at the time?
Well, because the Central Florida free thought community wanted it to become a hot topic. And so, the media unfortunately goes to any fire and proclaims it to be the new hot fire of the day. And so it got some attention.
Got a lot national.
It did. I wound up on Fox News National several times talking about it. At the end of the day, you ask about the motives. I think it's a lot about, I think it's much more about people just being disruptive than it is about them advancing any good cause.
Right.
And that's really the unfortunate nature or byproduct, I think, of social media. If you look at a lot of the social media posts, there's a lot of things out there that don't really add any real social value to any conversation. But because you keep clicking on it, those people that make it make money. And so it's come to a point now where people don't even have to present information or any material or content that advances anything. They just have to make it provocative. And those provocateurs are the ones who have created this atmosphere where now it doesn't have to be productive, it just needs to be provocative and cause a problem, because it draws people in. And the more we watch that stuff, the more they get paid and the more that they're encouraged to do it. It's the idea of the influencer, where they can make you watch, all these terrible things, but you don't learn from it. You don't get anything from it. They get rich off of it, but that's about it. So
when you get into fights like that, there are always legal fees, can get very expensive. It scares people and people will back off. You didn't back off.
No.
Obviously with some of your background and your education and everything,
Sure.
You knew the law, you knew the intent of the First Amendment. Why did you stay and continue to fight that? Which, by the way, let's explain. It was a Vietnam memorial. There was a cross that he was a local person, right? That he had built as part of the traveling Vietnam show, a display that went to various cities. Longwood got chosen, and the guy that had created this little memorial to Vietnam veterans ended up staying in your chambers, and it was really there. I mean, I'm assuming your motives just to honor the person who had made it, and also to honor those Vietnam vets that it was honoring. But because there was a cross in a government area, it became a big deal. But you said, no, I'm going to fight for this. Why is that?
So the short answer is because it was the right thing to do, and because I knew we were right.
Right.
So on both accounts, right? It was the right thing to do to honor those men and women who gave their lives in Vietnam. It was the right thing to do to honor Colonel Johnny Richardson, who was a Longwood resident who gave countless hours to Citizens on Patrol and to other community service events in the city, who was a dedicated community servant, who served in the Army. It was the right thing to do to honor him. It was the right thing to do to honor those men and women who came to visit the wall, who ordinarily wouldn't have been able to go to Washington. Those men and women who came and served their country and lost friends and family in Vietnam, who came to pay their respects. It was the right thing to do for all those people. And legally, I knew we were on solid ground. I knew that we didn't violate the 3 prongs of the lemon test, so to speak, right? And so I knew that we were well within our rights to do that, and I knew the motive behind the cross. And so it was a fight I was more than happy to take on, because I knew it was the right thing to do.
Good. In the end, we just want to clarify, the Longwood ended up backing out of the lawsuit and removing it. You didn't really agree with that, did you?
No, well, I was out of office when that happened.
I
had left office, and then the city commission, I think, acquiesced to that demand, really, from the Florida Free Thought folks. I disagree with it. I disagreed with it then. I disagree with it now. I tend to be I'm one of those elected officials that really respects the new guy. And so the new folks came in, and I didn't inject myself a lot into the operations of the city,
Right.
because it's not the right thing to do. If you're not in the seat, you don't have to pay the piper, so to speak. And
Right.
so, but I did express my concern to a number of the commissioners at the time, when that conversation started again, because I knew, again, we were right. It
Right.
was the right thing to do, and I knew that we were legally right. Even our lawyer, a really great city attorney, I had some real heart to hearts with him about, where do we stand on this? Or, are we going to be fighting an uphill battle? Or are we going to lose a lot of taxpayer money? How's this going to look? And he said, no, we're good. We're on solid ground.
Good.
And so, I knew it was the right thing to do.
So the forces out there, and you've been up against them, that are sort of, seem to be fighting some of these religious freedom issues, ACLU, FFRF,
Sure.
And others. Do you think it's a right versus wrong argument, or do you think it's more there's a good versus evil that's happening here?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know that it's a good versus evil, right versus wrong. I think it's a series of misinterpretations. So I think a lot of people think that by giving me my rights, they're losing their rights. And so it's one of the things that we had to express in Longwood, right? By allowing the cross to stand in the city hall, by honoring those people, by honoring the gentleman who made it, I didn't hurt anybody. We didn't hurt anybody's ability to come to City Hall and say their own prayer. We didn't hurt anybody's ability to come and testify. Everyone was always welcome at Longwood City Commission meetings. And so I think that there's a real problem that if you allow people to express their own rights and enjoy their own rights, that you're somehow or another taking rights away from other people. And that, unfortunately, and that seems to be more prevalent in the religious argument more than any other sector, right? And so, somehow it's been interpreted by a lot of people that allowing someone to pray hurts me. It stops me from being able to enjoy not praying or whatever it might be. And that's just not correct. So I don't know if it's good versus evil as much as it is just good versus uninformed, maybe. Might be a better way of putting it.
Well, I know you would answer that one way as a professor, but as a person of faith, you probably would see something else, certain trends that are going on. There's a heatedness behind this. There's behind the words, there seems to be a lot of hurt. And if I can't get my way, it's better off if you die. And you're going, this is not the political world that I know. There seems to be other factors that are really involved here.
Yeah, so as a Christian, as a Catholic, I am I'm very concerned for the future of the country. I pray for the country regularly because I feel like we are at a real crossroad, just morally, ethically, and I think we're either going to take a hard, and I don't mean this to sound political, but we're either going to take a hard right or a hard left.
Yeah.
Those will be the only things that those are the choices that we'll have to make. I do think, unfortunately, that we have been that religious arguments and religious faith has been co-opted by political operatives, by the news media, by a number of other organizations that use it to their benefit. Mm-hmm. And so again, the one thing I express to my students on a regular basis, the news is they sell soap. They put all this inflammatory stuff out because they want you to watch so that they can sell TV time to their advertisers. You ever wonder why the news stations put out, find out which city's water supply is poisoned, news at 11. Wouldn't you want to tell me that right now in case I'm about to take a shower? Oh. Why do you want me to wait until 11? Well, because at 11 o'clock, they get the most money for their revenue in the 30-second commercial spot, right? And so that's when they want you to watch. And so I always tell students to dig deeper, look further into facts, because all of these people, politicians are the same way, right? Politicians, they have no interest in solving the problems. There's a lot of politicians that there are a lot of, let me rephrase that. There are a lot of really good elected officials that really get in. They're not millionaires. They're teachers, they're bankers, they're lawyers, they're doctors, they're construction workers. They run for office because they care about something. And they think, you know what, this is my opportunity, I'm going to do so. But there are a group of politicians that have no interest in solving these problems because it's the problem that drives people to the polls.
Right.
And as long as they can keep ginning people up and saying, you're not getting what you want and you're getting hurt by these people, come and support me and I promise. Those same people have been making those arguments for 30 years. And the problems are still there. So maybe it's time to change horses.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think the real problem is that really good core issues have been co-opted by some people that have other motives.
Yeah. Well, no pressure on you, but the next generation is all in your hands as a UCF professor. And so we're counting on you to make this all work out.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a bright future ahead when it comes to politics, or are you cautious like most of us?
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic. Let's put it that way. I think that there's a lot of opportunity to do good. I think right now it's a really hot time to be involved in politics. But I do think that there are a lot of people working behind the scenes that are, in the policy structure that are trying to do right by people, right? They're trying to make sure that people get a fair shake, that the system works the way it's supposed to work, and the politicians are just kind of off fighting and doing what they're going to do. But I do think that there's a bright future for the country. I as an American, I think it's just natural for us to have hope, right? So, we are literally the people on this planet that always see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of places that don't. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to keep that light burning.
Oh, good. Well, we appreciate what you're doing and appreciate what you did in politics. Hopefully this isn't the end for you. Maybe there's an opportunity for you to jump back into the game. Are you feeling that sort of pull maybe a little bit?
Well, I'd be lying to you if I told you I didn't miss it. You do miss it. But right now I feel pretty comfortable doing what I'm doing, working with, an organization that supports families that really are in need and trouble. And I'm really happy there. I never say never,
Okay.
So.
Well, it's good. Well, thank you, Joseph, for being a part of this. Encourage people to go check out that story about the Longwood Cross. We go into a lot of detail, and we just appreciate all that you've done to hold the line. Thank you for being here today.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for the opportunity.